Ukraine pushed Poland too far. Now Warsaw is setting terms. Under my previous video about the Volhynia massacres, two reactions appeared again and again. Some people called the documented history Russian propaganda. Others used that same history to praise Russia. Both reactions completely miss the point. Poland is not turning toward Moscow. Poland is beginning to ask a much more serious question. What does real partnership with Ukraine actually mean? For more than 4 years, Poland has been one of Ukraine's most important supporters. Poles opened their homes to refugees. The Polish state supplied weapons, fuel, humanitarian aid, political backing, military training, and access to a critical logistical corridor. NATO reported that its support hub in Poland was handling roughly 18,000 tons of material every month for delivery to the Ukrainian armed forces. So when relations between Warsaw and Kyiv begin to fracture, this is not a minor argument between two emotional neighbors. It can affect military logistics, reconstruction, European Union accession, refugee policy, and the security of NATO's eastern flank. The real change taking place is not that Poland is abandoning Ukraine. It is that Poland is moving from unconditional solidarity toward conditional partnership. And Kyiv needs to understand the difference. The present crisis began with a decision signed by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on May 26, 2026. By presidential decree, a Ukrainian Special Operations Forces unit received the honorary name named after the heroes of the UPA. For many Ukrainians, the UPA symbolizes resistance to Soviet domination. For Poles, the same letters are inseparable from the organized ethnic cleansing of Polish civilians in Volhynia and eastern Galicia. At least 100,000 Polish citizens were murdered, according to the official position of the Polish state. Many still lie in unmarked graves. This is not about asking Ukrainians to reject their independence. It is not about denying Soviet crimes against Ukraine. It is about a modern state choosing, today, to honor a formation while refusing to confront the full meaning of that name for its victims. That decision crossed a Polish red line. President Karol Nawrocki responded by revoking President Zelenskyy's Order of the White Eagle, Poland's highest state decoration. The Ukrainian president then returned the decoration. The dispute expanded beyond the presidency. Prime Minister Donald Tusk and other senior Polish officials also criticized the Ukrainian decision, although their tone and proposed methods were not identical. That matters. Poland's president and government are political rivals, yet both recognize that Kyiv had created a serious problem. On July 8th, Zelenskyy and Nawrocki met in Ankara during the NATO summit. The meeting lasted more than an hour. They agreed that Russia remained the principal security threat, but they did not resolve the historical dispute. 3 days later, on July 11th, Poland marked the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. Nawrocki emphasized that Poland was not condemning the entire Ukrainian nation. It was condemning the ideology and organizations connected with mass murder. Tusk said that the guilty must be named, the crime must be condemned, and the victims must receive dignified burials. He also linked honest historical reckoning with the values expected of a future European Union member. That is not a tribal feud. That is a European principle. Germany did not build its place in modern Europe by demanding silence about its crimes. Reconciliation became possible because truth, responsibility, and remembrance were treated as foundations, not obstacles. Ukraine cannot reasonably expect Poland to support its European future while telling Polish families that the symbols associated with their murdered relatives are none of Poland's business. But history is only one part of the crisis. The second warning comes from business, and this may matter even more to Western investors. In May of 2021, the Polish engineering company Control Process signed a contract with Lviv's municipal company, Green City. The project involved the design, construction, and commissioning of a mechanical and biological waste treatment plant with an annual capacity of approximately 250,000 tons. The wider municipal waste program was backed by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the E5P Fund, the Clean Technology Fund, and the city of Lviv. It was supposed to become a symbol of modernization, reconstruction, and European cooperation. Instead, it became a warning. Lviv accused Control Process of repeated delays and contractual violations. The city terminated the contract in the spring of this year. Control Process rejected those accusations. The company argued that the plant was approximately 95% complete, and that key remaining infrastructure, including external utilities, belonged to the city's side of the contract. Normally, this could be described as a complicated commercial dispute. But this case has gone much further. The contract used the international FIDIC system. Under that system, disputes can be referred to an independent dispute adjudication board, known as a DAB. A DAB is not merely a friendly mediator. Its decisions are contractually binding and are supposed to be implemented immediately, even if one side later challenges them in full arbitration. According to the decisions and summaries reviewed by Polish business media, Control Process obtained 7 favorable DAB decisions. Those proceedings contained 75 individual findings in favor of the Polish company and none in favor of Green City. The DAB found that major delays were connected with obligations the municipal company had failed to perform. It ordered payments to Control Process. It also concluded that Lviv's attempt to terminate the contract was invalid, that the contract remained in force, and that the company should retain access to the construction site. The dispute then moved to the International Chamber of Commerce in Paris. On May 16th, an emergency arbitrator confirmed that the contract's international arbitration route led to the ICC in Paris, rather than to a local arbitration process in Kyiv. The emergency order was not a final ruling on every commercial claim. That distinction matters. But the arbitrator also noted Lviv's refusal to implement the DAB decisions and preserved Control Process's right to pursue compensation in the full proceedings. So this is no longer simply one company accusing one city. The dispute resolution mechanisms written into the contract itself have repeatedly produced outcomes favorable to the Polish contractor. Yet the city proceeded with the termination, drew on bank guarantees, removed the company from the project, and sought another contractor. Lviv still defends its position and says Control Process failed to meet its obligations. The final merits of every claim have not yet been decided. But the pattern is already serious enough to raise a larger question. What does this signal to investors? If a company from Ukraine's closest logistical ally can complete most of a major internationally backed project, obtain repeated binding decisions under the agreed contract, and still face non-payment, the drawdown of bank guarantees, removal from the site, and years of legal conflict, what should a German, American, French, or Japanese investor expect? This is Lviv, a relatively stable city in western Ukraine, not an industrial zone near the front. If contract enforcement becomes political even there, the reconstruction of eastern Ukraine will face a credibility problem that no conference speech can hide. Sympathy does not replace enforceable contracts. Patriotism does not protect foreign capital. Investors commit billions when rules are predictable, agreements are respected, and independent decisions are implemented. Polish officials have already reacted. The Foreign Ministry publicly stated that it could not currently recommend Polish companies invest in the city of Lviv while this dispute remained unresolved. That warning was directed at one city, not at Ukraine as a whole. But Kyiv should still take it seriously. Ukraine's reconstruction will require public money, private capital, insurance, arbitration, and trust on a vast scale. Trust can disappear much faster than concrete can be poured. There are signs that Kyiv understands the danger. On July 11th, President Zelenskyy called for full truth, dignified remembrance, and faster searches for the victims of the Volhynia tragedy. Ukrainian officials also announced a new phase of exhumation work in the former Polish villages of Ostrówki and Wola Ostrowiecka, scheduled from July 13th to August 7th, with Ukrainian and Polish specialists taking part. That is a positive step. It should be acknowledged as such. But one positive step does not erase the decision to honor the UPA. It does not settle the dispute over the Order of the White Eagle, and it does not yet prove that Ukraine has changed its wider historical policy. The real question is whether the exhumations represent a lasting breakthrough or political damage control after Kyiv realized it had pushed Poland too far. We should judge the answer by actions. Will all burial sites be opened? Will archives be accessible? Will identified victims receive dignified graves? Will Ukrainian leaders clearly acknowledge the organized killing of Polish civilians? And will modern state honors stop presenting the UPA as an uncomplicated symbol of heroism? There is also a democratic reality that Western commentators often ignore. Polish public opinion is changing. An IBRIS survey conducted after the recent dispute found that 33.6% of Poles said their attitude toward Ukrainians had worsened. Only 1.8% said it had improved. A clear majority reported no change, which means Poland has not suddenly become universally anti-Ukrainian. But the direction is unmistakable. Another IBRIS survey found that 59.7% of Poles opposed Ukraine joining the European Union. Democratic governments cannot ignore this indefinitely. Polish leaders may believe that supporting Ukraine remains strategically necessary. I agree with them. Russia remains the main military threat to Poland and the region. But strategic necessity does not mean unlimited political credit. Poland can continue military and humanitarian support while attaching conditions to diplomatic, economic, and European support. Ukraine's accession process is real. On June 15th, the European Union opened the first negotiating cluster, covering fundamentals such as the rule of law, fundamental rights, democratic institutions, public administration reform, and economic criteria. But accession is not automatic. The process is merit-based. Opening and closing negotiation areas generally requires unanimous agreement among the member states. The final accession treaty also requires unanimous approval and ratification. Poland, therefore, has genuine leverage. That leverage should not be used for revenge. It should be used to establish the conditions of a healthy partnership. Those conditions are not complicated. First, unrestricted searches, exhumations, identification, and dignified burials for the victims. Second, historical honesty, including clear condemnation of the anti-Polish campaign conducted by OUNB and the UPA. Third, predictable commercial rules, respect for contracts, and protection for companies investing in reconstruction. Fourth, diplomacy based on reciprocity. Poland is not a client to be managed, a warehouse to be used, or a source of support that can be taken for granted. It is a sovereign partner. And partnership is not servitude. It is not one side providing weapons, money, market access, and political backing, while the other dismisses its historical trauma and commercial interests. Real partnership means mutual obligations. It means both sides can say no. It means allies listen when a red line is crossed. Ukraine is fighting for its survival. That is true. Russia is the aggressor. That is also true. But neither truth gives Kyiv immunity from accountability. Poland is not asking Ukraine to surrender to Russia. Poland is asking Ukraine to decide what kind of European state it wants to become. A state that treats history as a weapon and contracts as optional, or a state capable of truth, law, reciprocity, and respect. The era of blank checks is ending, not because Poland has stopped caring about Ukraine, but because solidarity without conditions eventually stops being solidarity. It becomes dependency. Poland is not abandoning Ukraine. Poland is setting terms. And if Kyiv is serious about a shared European future, it should listen before the political, economic, and historical costs become much higher. If you value independent analysis from the heart of Central Europe, subscribe to Ollie K. Political. I do not publish every day, but when I do, I intend to give you facts, context, and a perspective that too often disappears from Western coverage.